title of this morning's Dharma talk is, what is it? What did I call
it? Minimal meditation.
Minimal. Minimal. Less meditation. Don't meditate. Meditate very, very little. How does that sound? So, I'm always talking about this. So what I am in an environment where everyone thinks more is better. I would agree with that in one way. More meditation is better. That's why I call this minimal meditation. Available to you in your awareness if you'll just give me the benefit of the doubt and sit down, hold still, and watch what moves. It's that simple. Different things. I won't go into those. But this is from doing this for a long period of time. So the idea is that if you minimize, you sit down, hold still, and you minimize everything you can without struggle, without aggression, without pushing or pulling or trying to find how can I make this way, or how can I make this way, or how can I be more calm. It's just that's a terrible piece of propaganda there that's being propagandized or promoted by those in the mindfulness community. It's not that it couldn't be helpful, but it's relatively helpful. It's not ultimately helpful. What do I mean by that? I have no idea what I mean by that, but I know what I mean by that. So what am I saying? I'm saying simply sit down, hold still, and minimize everything. You got to the cushion, that's doing something. You're sitting down, that's doing something. You're holding still, that's doing something. You're endeavoring to observe, that's doing something. Once you sit in that position, don't try to maintain it. You just use what I'm saying is, when I say use the body, I'm saying just be aware of the body. You want something to look at how the body feels. You want something to look at the wall, look at the floor. Look at your thought patterns. Just observe, just observe. Put everything on the ego, the structure of the ego, the false structure of ego will hide off in the wings, and it'll put everything it can on stage, but its true identity. It'll put all the actors it can muster up on stage. This is how I am. Well, I'm the kind of person that does this or does that. Well, I never do that. I've been told that, but I don't believe that. Well, you want to know what I believe? So we do this. We struggle, suffering, difficulty. So minimal. There's quite a few artists in different times here in the last century, half century or so, have been not only in the visual arts, but also in all the arts are showing up, minimizing things. Less is better, which is something I say. Don't do anything unless you have to. And for years, I've been endeavoring to find a way of talking about this in a way that will directly connect with the person I'm talking to. The person is listening, so that you can get closer to this conceptually without being trapped in the, as Nagarjuna talks about in the cage, you're trying to escape. May take a lot of, you might even call it bravery. It may take a lot of bravery to just be the emotion that you're trying to avoid or get rid of or explain away or blame. It's because of this I'm feeling this way. It's not that isn't relatively true, but it's circular. And the circularity of it keeps you on the Ferris wheel, merry-go-round, tilt-a-whirl, or lawnmower. The lawnmower mowing around the lawn. So minimal, the interesting thing about minimalizing, is that a word? Minimalize? Doesn't sound very good. Minimize. Interesting thing about minimize. Don't look at me that way. Is that when you do that, then what gets maximized is the hideouts of ego, the thought patterns that are crunching this way and crunching that way, and constantly building structures to keep that ego secure so that you can live the rest of your life thinking you're somebody that will never die. Well, everybody dies. We know that. Everybody dies. That's the way we avoid it. Well, everybody dies. Well, everybody knows that. We all die someday. Yeah. Death comes without warning. And this is how much more positively, if you want to use that kind of a word, or uplifted your life could be if you really were aware of its ending, of it's coming to an end. So make use of this. Make use of who you are every day. When I say make use, I'm saying try to see fundamentally what your life is about. What is it? Because for each person, it's going to be different. One person may need to never do this again, never come in here. If you see what this is, you don't need to come in a place like this. Or you may become a monk. You may realize that this is what I want to spend the rest of my life just looking on the fundamental falsity of identity. The fundamental that conceptually you can get it. There's quite a few people who, as soon as they get it, immediately start to elaborate on the whole thing, and they become scholars. And I'm not against scholars. We invite them to come here to talk. People who know a lot conceptually. Go ahead.
You said, well, meditating don't maintain anything. And I was wondering how to relate to the stillness that you recommend.
Yes, the stillness that is not maintained. Maintained stillness is closer to some of the teachings of trying to be separate from things and be still and be like the jhana states or some kind of idea of samadhi. Rather, actual samadhi is totally disturbed. Actual samadhi is not separate from anything. So don't miss your life. Your samadhi is your life. It is your life. If you're not agreeing with it, objecting to it, or shutting down on it. Those are the three ways that we rotate away from our Buddha nature into some kind of cavern of, Plato's cave, that kind of thing. The kind of thing where we're really magnetized or repulsed by certain things, and we live out of that passion and aggression. We live, and if that doesn't work, if pulling doesn't work, pushing away doesn't work, then we ignore. Those are the three.
In the past, you've really emphasized the stillness, and I was wondering in what way that's emphasized, how important that is.
I changed my mind. Okay, good enough. So how was I emphasizing? How did you receive that? How did that look to you?
That the stillness was really important, to hold as still as we can, and then if movement happens, there's movement, but to kind of return to that.
Yes.
Stillness.
So something I've been saying maybe more recently is when I you could say run into students who are having difficulty with the stillness situation, then I say, well, just keep it to short periods. Some people who I talk to are only sitting for 5 minutes a day. Others are sitting for several periods. Of people here are sitting for several periods a day. But it's not about a maintenance. It's, of course, sit as still as you can for as long as you can, but pay attention to how your body feels. This is not ancient Japan. This is not even ancient Tibet. This is right now. This is a cumulative tradition, not a revealed one. Somebody didn't come. The only thing that was revealed is not separate, dependent origination, pratitya samutpada, and all the ways that we show how it looks like a bunch of chunks of different things that are all separate, but seen as they are, not separate. That's difficult because it looks like to ego, well, can I conclude that? No, you can't conclude. Yes.
You had said at the beginning of the talk that during meditation, this is paraphrasing, that you minimize activity. And I'm wondering if there should be any minimization in post-meditation.
So if the sitting meditation if you sit down and face a wall for several hours, you've pretty much done the memorized. You've done that. Sit down and then the interesting thing about this, which is what I was really trying to get to, was if you do everything you can to slow down the process of elaboration and production and extending out, it's not trying to stop this, trying to start that, and trying to keep that away. If you sit still and don't do anything, do the minimalization or minimal meditation, then you begin to see the actual structure, which I started to talk about earlier, of how the ego keeps making up stuff under the surface. So actually, you begin to see the elaborations of ego in the basement, in the workshop, down by the foundation of the ego, rather than the proliferation above the surface of all the things the ego wants to do, and it even has fantastic philosophies about, don't mind me, I'm really not a very self-centered person, and I'm constantly helping others, and there's all kinds of things you can spend your life thinking about. Pardon me. So the amazing thing about slowing everything down is then you begin to see the person the first day you meditate. You can eventually see, oh, my mind's so busy. Often people say, I can't stop my mind. And of course, I would say, you don't have to do that. Just watch what's moving. And then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, maybe a year later, I'm driving myself crazy, and which I get very happy about. Not because I like to see people suffer, because I know what I had to go through in order to see what this was. In order to see it, you have to actually look at all of the things that it is not, which is confusion, grasping, rejection, warfare, peace fair. And any direction you go with anything is something else, relative. So, but by doing very little, minimal, it shows up very much in various kinds of artwork. If you're going to cut your art production, whatever it may be, whether it's John Cage, in 1953, I think he stood by a piano, didn't play anything, and he had somebody turn the pages for him, but he never played anything. Wasn't that 1953 that he did that? So minimal. So that started showing up with Mondrian back in the turn of the early part of the last century. Painter who just had blocks of color, rectangular blocks of color. So when someone uses that kind of situation, you can really see the balance or lack thereof in that situation. It's very hard to take 4 shapes and put them together in a rectangle. And if anything is out of balance, it'll be okay. It'll be interesting, but it won't be commanding and powerful unless someone has really, really spent a lot of time looking at not much. That's when we begin to go deeply into this. That's when it becomes a personal journey, when you actually feel lost, don't know where you're at. And that's why it's necessary to have the teacher to say, keep going. But it looks like a cliff out there. It looks dark. I know. Keep going. The kindest thing that was ever done for me is to ignore me. But that's me. That's because I'm full of myself. Still am. Nothing needs to change, my friends. I assume you're my friends. Nothing needs to change in the way that the ego mind thinks it does. But I'm not feeling, so that must mean. Don't abandon your emotions for that must mean, or who did that. It doesn't matter who did it. And it doesn't matter how you feel. That's an astonishing thing to run into. It doesn't matter whether I feel good or bad. So when you do slow down, when it is minimal meditation, not the kind that has been taught in past centuries, that needed to be taught. So it doesn't, somebody's done something wrong and now this old man's doing something right. No, it is not a revealed thing. Here's the truth, swallow it, believe it, do what I say. It is a cumulative tradition that each person sees their own Buddha nature and expresses that through their own personality. I'm not copying anybody. You might say that's obvious. I can't be somebody else. And if you see who you are, you won't need any more. You don't need a guide. You might need a teacher, instructor, or might even need a guru. I did, but you may not need that. You may just need to hear what this is and practice it. Stop objecting to anything. Stop agreeing with anything, and don't look away from anything. And stop avoiding your true nature, which is right in front of you all the time. So by sitting down and holding still, I'll go through it here. You're sitting still and everything slows down. Less is happening. And you're in the Zendo, or you're in a place that's very quiet. And 3 or 4 hours go by. And maybe you've stretched your leg. Maybe you stood up. Maybe you've gone to the bathroom. Maybe you've gone out and smoked a cigarette. No, don't do that. And eventually the structure that is the underlayment of this situation starts to arise. And this is when most, not all, but some meditators want you to look at it. Just look at it. You don't have to be in love with it. You don't have to be in hate with it. You don't have to pretend it's not there. You don't have to do anything. And then for each person here, the way that shows up in your particular mind stream and your matrix of me, and my stuff, and my I situation, my personal pronouns, is going to be just enough different from other people, but because of the causes and conditions that come from beginning of this time till now, till this so-called now, it is totally unique. And so therefore, one shoe does not fit anybody. You have to do it yourself. You have to actually see this yourself. And that's why face-to-face, looking at a teaching person face-to-face, it has to have the chemistry that's important for you personally. Don't believe a word I say. If what I'm saying sounds fishy, leave. Go do something else. Find a teacher that is not fishy, but find a teacher. Without a teacher, I don't know if this can be done. If you do it without a teacher, then you think you've done something. And the sneaky way of ego of coming up very sudden, I'm just going to stay off stage, but actually I'm in charge. But you get to look like a nobody. You get to look like an enlightened being. You might even be able to mention that. Just watch for a time when it seems to be open enough where you can say, well, I guess I am kind of enlightened. But be careful, because a lot of people don't like it when they hear that. Shoka.
What is the chemistry?
All the pieces and particles and of everything that looks so vastly extensive and different and separate and valueless and full of value and gold and dog shit. I mean, it's just, all that kind of stuff is coming together in countless numbers of ways. I'm emphasizing countless numbers of ways. Tell them I said hello. Countless numbers of ways. And that can come together, and you can't predict it. I think you can recognize it. But it might, the way it might arise as a fear, if the chemistry might be fear. More about that if you have it.
How is the chemistry between a teacher and a student different from other forms of chemistry?
A teacher-student situation, if the person is realized, if it's a true teacher, if it's a true teacher, then you'll be, even though it looks like somebody different, somebody old, or somebody young, or somebody weird, or somebody, could look like any number of things, but it's always your projection. You're projecting that person, and to most of the world, if that starts to come about, that you're projecting that person will shift gears, because they'll start to feel threatened by you. And so the threat of being nothing is powerful, and ego does not want to look at that. This is why we have friendship and enemyship. That's why we have the polarities. So to keep us in the chain of what? Dependent origination, to keep us in samsara, the wheel. This planet, this living planet wants you. It's very, very magnetic and charismatic. You don't have to do something. You just have to, whatever this is going to show up as your particular style. If you meet the teacher, if you can handle it, your belief in a solid identity will begin to come apart. And that may either cause you to run away, or it may cause you to devote your life to this. More? There's no right or wrong to it, though.
Along those same lines, what was the chemistry with you and Coben?
He hated me. I don't know for sure. I would have to talk to him about it. but of course he's dead. So, but I think he saw, I'm just speculating, probably saw how full of myself I was and how pretentious I was about what I knew, and how I actually needed his approval somehow. And he he didn't give it. It was painful. So the chemistry was, he was my teacher. He gave me what I needed in order to fundamentally help me. Now, I don't know whether he personally was awake or not. Probably was, because he seemed to be able to see very, very clearly, as could Trungpa Rinpoche. So you get just enough help, but not too much. Yes?
Earlier you said you might need a teacher, you might need a guru, and you've said a number of times that you're not a guru, you're a teacher. So what is the difference?
Your projection.
What is a guru?
Guru is a Satguru is a true teacher. Guru just means teacher, but the images that whole idea of true teacher is cloaked with all kinds of projections that people have of some kind of deity person or some kind of savior person or some kind of a extra special know-it-all. So it could function anyway. But it'll be about you, whether you use that word or not. So some people, if you were to call me Guruji, I probably would stop you, because that's not your. But Yasmin calls me Guruji. She's from India. That's her. It's in her language structure. Go ahead.
Earlier you mentioned the mindfulness community. What is meant by that?
Well, what did I say?
I don't know, in the beginning you were talking about the mindfulness community and somehow in contrast to how we practice here.
Okay, so some of what's happened, not all, but some of what is happening there, and I don't go around keeping notes on everybody, but what I gather from what little I have seen, there's quite a bit of emphasis on meditation so that you can calm down, meditation so that you can be peaceful, meditation so that you can, harmonize yourself. It's not incorrect, and for some people that might be all they can do. That might be all they can do. Some people don't want to actually go do any deep diving. So, but it's generally promoted as something that people should do, and it's good for you, and all of that. It's not good for you. It's devastating. But you don't need to do that. You can just meditate and have an awareness practice, contemplative practice, or even a devotional practice that has to do with working with the mind in that way. So it's not wrong. We just say it's more circular, because we tend to get better and get worse. Have you noticed? It's quite irritating. Yes.
What is what we project on the teacher?
You project your own ideas, your mind, your preconceptions.
Preconceptions about what?
Yourself and the teacher and the world and the teachings, your idea of what they are, what they're about.
Does that show us something? Like, that just seems like such a mess, it's hard to make any sense of it.
I like that. That's a minimum. When you say it's just a mess, that's kind of a conclusion, but it's minimal. Yes.
How does one see clearly amongst the 10,000 things?
Keep looking at them. Watch them come and go in the form of your own thought patterns, your own mind, and they'll continue to look separate. They'll look separate. But if you don't push on it, if you don't pull on it, passion, aggression, or however you want, if you don't do anything with it, no shifting around dependent on that. If you don't join in dependent origination, but you just observe the dependent origination, then maybe you'll stop confusing yourself.
A question from Mayun in France. Is there a point to minimalize? I mean, in the creative process, going so far as not playing even a note or adding a dot of painting, is it a way to give a chance to do something again with some more respect for space?
Well said. Yeah, that would be respect for space is a good, because space isn't something. It's not, has no phenomenological oomph. So I think it's different with each person, with each meditator, with each artist, with each person, and it's I hesitate to use this somewhat because we jump to a conclusion about believing our thoughts, but we need to really trust ourselves. When I say that, trust whatever comes into your mind stream. Trust that in the sense that you're just going to look at it. You're just going to receive. So if it's a pile of garbage, just receive. If it's a pile of rainbows, then just receive. If it's just receive. If it's just like the weather, Mayun, that's happening in Brittany is Mayun sent a video of the waves crashing on the shore. It's really a difficult weather there. You just receive. You notice the shore just receive the waves. Kind of a corny, romantic idea, but it's true. It's relatively true. So just you may find yourself like not doing a particular changing the way that you express or work as an artist, going one. But there's no way I would come back and comment or correct you or get you to stop doing this and start doing that. Particularly, maybe in some ways. If I haven't understood the question, go ahead.
Using her image of respect for space, how do we disrespect space?
Fill it with junk, ideas, opinions. But you have to first see the way you do that. You can't just have an idea about what you're doing. It's much more subtle than that. You need to actually watch sitting, holding still, and watch the process of the way the mind just keeps making up stuff about everything. It's just a relentless, it's just a cornucopia of I'm not going to say it. I'm censoring myself. I'm not going to say bullshit. Oh. Shucks. I mean, yeah, go ahead. What is that all over your arm? Is that a new tattoo?
It is
Nice.
temporary.
Oh, good.
If it looks like our habit energy is to just completely fill up the space, even in like the arts, like music,
Yes.
it's just very complicated, not minimal. Should I go in
Like
and
the kind of music that you enjoy, yeah.
And-
What is that called?
obnoxious?
No, no. What is it called?
Metal.
Metal, yeah. Metal music. So is it about that you're talking about?
That and even the way I talk, the way I just move around, the way I work on any of the projects here, it's just,
Okay, what's the question?
do I need to intentionally cut back on that?
Mm-hmm. That's a misunderstanding. No, what you need to cut back on is the time in which you do that. Not what you're doing, not the process, not the form. Don't fiddle with the form, observe the forms. What you do is you sit down, hold still, and you minimize the whole thing. Sometimes I've talked about this as a elimination diet for ego. Sit down and just eliminate everything, reduce everything to this. So there's very little production, and any production that is happening eventually will start to flare up because it's not being obstructed by your embodiment as belief in a person who's doing this and not doing that and holding this and making this and pushing on that and painting this and bandaging your arm. And just so holding still and observe that, then the chaos will start to show up in the form of your mind, which is where it actually is anyway. That's with a capital A anyway.
How can I endeavor to respect space when in those situations it clearly looks like I'm disrespecting it?
And so all you have to do is be aware of that. Don't correct things. I don't know how else to say it. It's not that you might not feel like correcting it. Don't correct that. Don't correct anything. Whatever's arising, the less you do push or pull or add to or join in with or don't join anything. We don't even have any membership here. I was a member of the Shambhala community for many, many years. And not that that's wrong, but I don't think we want to do that here. Everybody's completely individual. And that needs to be looked at. And the only thing I can say in your situation is sit. Just continue to sit. Yes.
You'll say what you're looking for, you're looking at. And it looks like right now what I'm looking for is to just be happy all the time without any repercussions. Do we need to look for something that's more realistic?
I think the very best thing for you personally, is you should look for your vow. You're here sewing a robe to be fully ordained as a monk, and that vow is important. Be with all things, save all beings, put others before yourself. I know it's hard to do that. Very hard to do that. And you might not succeed at that, but it's not about success and failure. It is about your intention. Always about your intention. Because eventually you find there isn't anyone that has an intention. Then the intention is just dissolves. The directionality just dissolves. There isn't anything with this, and you no longer are swayed or confused by time and space. Go ahead.
It seems like I tend to have this like hopeless romantic attitude towards that, like where the putting others before myself should just be effortless, and it should be like to.
No, it's hard work. It wears me out. Go ahead.
I think that's what I was going to ask about. Like, is there effort to?
No, there's no effort. No, it's even kind of a gift that you just don't have to exhaust yourself on anything anymore. The energy you need actually comes from everybody. Somebody comes and gives you a bundle of energy and says, "Here, help me." So you're actually using. You could say, just as a relative way, you could say you're using the energy of the people that come before you. Go ahead.
Is the relative exhaustion that we experience an indication of anything?
Probably fighting with stuff, wanting to be different. Second noble truth, wanting things to be different than they are, causes suffering. So, but it is about seeing that, not about changing it. And quite often the practices down through the centuries, not all of them, but some of them are about trying to go in and get you to be a different person, get you to be an enlightened person, and a person who no longer acts selfish, self-centered. This is why some teachers are so outrageous, is because if they realize what this is, they're no longer objecting to their incarnation. And if they're no longer objecting to their incarnation, they don't give a shit of what you think of what they're doing, because you're it's just a relative context that's coming up, and it may be relatively true, but they're not operating out of a relatively true situation. You.
A question from Vishal in San Jose.
Vishal.
Do non-minimal meditations quicken the process, and minimal meditation the slowest of them all?
No. Is that the only question?
There's another one
You
from.
gave me a either or. I pretty much ties me up, but let me get that. So I'm happy to address that further. Yes.
A question from Yelena in New York.
Yes.
How can one tell that they really have to do something when there is a strong sense that they have to do it, yet there is also a lot of resistance to doing it?
I think it speaks for everybody in some sense. We want to do, we need to do, want to do, but there's a lot of resistance. We need to meditate, but getting to the Krishna is difficult. I just think it's a matter of persistence. And one of the things that goes by the wayside quite often is use a schedule. If you have a job, you have to be there on time. If you have a job working for someone, you could think of it the same way. You know, I've sometimes said, done it myself for myself. I meditate every day at 7 a.m. And then at least, if nothing else, at least look at that every day. Put it on your mirror so you see that and you notice the way you don't do it. Another way to do it is to minimize your obligation, but don't miss the obligation. So minimize your obligation relative to how you're feeling and how you're doing. In other words, one student of mine is very busy with her job and has difficulty with it. She knows who she is, and she wasn't sitting at all. And I said, well, just sit down and strike the bell or a water glass or something. Sit down, form, and then 5 minutes later, hit it twice and get up and go do something else. I said the emphasis on the length of time is important, but the most important situation is observing the form. So to break that by saying, well, I can't even sit for 5 minutes. Well, then sit for 3 minutes, sit for 30 seconds, but start the form, take the form, observe the form, end the form, get up and go to work or go do whatever it is that seems to have your attention or your time. So, it would be the way Elena's talking there. It was Elena, right? Elena. So the way she's talking is there's this kind of a problem. I think keep it very simple. Just whatever the situation that you're talking about. Excuse me. If it is meditation, then try that. Try very, very short periods where it's a strong form for 30 seconds or 2 minutes or 8 minutes or something, and then don't try to extend it just because you feel like you can. First, spend a month or two just doing 8 minutes, so you have that down, and then start to extend it.
Question from Susan in Traverse City.
Yes.
Are we energy beings?
Well, I am. It's a way, it's a concept. So energy is looked at lots of different ways. And I would say energy, we're spiritual. I like to say, which has been said way before I got here, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. I think it's pretty interesting because who you actually are can't go away, can't disappear because it hasn't appeared. So this is a temporary download. Here we are, 72 years. Of course, I've made it a little past that because I eat well. I know it's funny, isn't it? Not everybody would agree with me, but if I continue to live, if I died, then they'd say, eating bad food. Yes.
Another question from Mayun.
Yes, Yoon.
Is there a risk that respect for space prevails over action, even if action is motivated to save all beings?
Read that again. She's thought about that quite a bit before she said it.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a risk that respect for space prevails over action, even if action is motivated to save all beings?
If the respect for space is further extending itself as a credential, if there's someone there that feels like they're respecting space, this is a misunderstanding. Marc-en-ciel. It's a misunderstanding. We tend to want some kind of reference point. So whatever we do, we try to congratulate ourselves. Not that you're doing that, Miyun, but we tend to, because to do something with nothing showing up, this is the path where things start to show up. This might be parts of the path, but it also might be, rest areas or sidetracks that look very, very glittery and accomplishment oriented. It's very seductive, those kind of traps. Just say one further thing to Miyun. I don't think you would have that problem personally. I mean, I think it could have. I understand why you're asking it, but I don't think that would be an issue for you in your practice because I talk to you quite a bit.
Is respecting space the same thing as not filling up space?
That could be a way of not filling it up. Like you're in a room with 3 people and they're all having a conversation and you're listening to what's there and you're magnetized in because what they're talking about, something about. So you're magnetized into going in. It's not about not doing that, but you could actually just respect the space in which the conversation between the 3 other people in the room or 2 other people is happening. Look at the space and look at the energy that's happening with those people rather than joining in with your 2 cents worth because for whatever reason, behind it is going to be relative.
Is the opposite of respecting space, and just relatively, or the only way I can relate to that is that something needs to shift in that area because I'm not respecting space. So I don't. What should I do?
You don't have to change anything. Just keep going. Just you meditate a lot. You're meditating more than an hour a day, 2 hours a day,
Usually 4.
4 hours a day. I think just keep doing that. Just keep doing that and watch that area where you're critical of yourself. Just watch the area. Don't join the critic. You don't need to double up on that negativity. Just receive the negativity. So it's not easy because the ego, everything in the ego department, which is just off stage watching everything, unless it's on stage receiving applause, is watching that situation, and that's how the maintenance happens by instead of just observing, just receiving, just giving that your attention. We have ideas about what we're giving attention to and what we're receiving. We add on to whatever we're receiving. So minimal, keep it to a minimum without struggle. I'm not talking about doing some kind of artificial minimalism. I'm saying that just watch the movement. And if you watch the movement, then you just using the metaphor of passion, aggression, ignorance, or the structure of pushing, pulling, and shutting down, looking at that, if you do nothing with it, if you don't join any one of those three, but you don't ignore them, this is when ego feels the most threatened. I mean, generally speaking, there might be other parts to it that even I don't see. But don't do anything with it. In other words, the way Trungpa Rinpoche would say, he had several ways of saying that were very helpful to me. And not right away, but over the years, I would continue to return to things that he said. And you should, if you're a student of mine, you should continue to return to what I say, because I'm probably just saying stuff he said. Just laundered. Willingness to be a fool is really a good one. That really, because I thought I already feel like a fool, but the willingness to be a fool was that was different. Just don't object to who you are. I say don't miss your life. It may show up as being silly or unappreciated by others or criticized by others. And sometimes it's easier to just go with somebody else's opinion of us than somebody else, because at least if we get better, then they'll be friends with us. Make perfect sense. Kiyun.
When you're talking about ego feeling threatened, does that feel minimal?
What? When I'm talking about
When
does I feel
ego
minimal?
is threatened,
Huh?
when ego is threatened, does it feel minimal?
If you don't do anything with it, if you don't explain it, if you don't blame anybody for, like, here's your self-centered, and you feel threatened if you do nothing with it, but just feel it would be like have a willingness, which is not actually a thought. It's more of an attitude. It's like the attitudes of the paramitas or the attitude of the 16 precepts. Those are attitudes. The attitude of generosity, not easy to do that. The attitude of discipline, not easy to do that. I mean, to have an attitude of that, which doesn't look for accomplishment. So if the ego, the self-centeredness feels threatened and doesn't do anything about it, then that's minimal. And how you would know is there would be, along with that, if you checked in, and this is a way of checking in without leaving the room, without leaving a closet, without leaving the bread box, see if you want something else. Or if it's like checking in such a way, it's very subtle to say, it's like, I don't care if I ever get out of this feeling. You don't care if you feel threatened. If you're looking to get out of it, then it's, as Pache would say, very tricky. Very tricky. He didn't talk like that.
How is the self different from the ego?
The self?
Yes.
Well, self is used in different ways, and we're getting into those identity concepts. So I would say very similar, although in self-realization fellowship, the Indian tradition would say that it's more about a higher form of self, or Atman. And it's not that couldn't show up in the Buddhist practice, but we don't go into it and name it and give it a credential. I think that kind of thing functions in that area. In the third turning teachings of Buddha nature, it's about that kind of realization, but it's very easy for someone who is kind of attached to non-theism, which quite a few people are, thinking that you can't do that. You can't talk that way. They'll lock you up if you try to promote a self or an ego. Maybe, maybe not. But in the realm of non-duality, anything is possible. Anything, a self, an ego. But if there's nothing else, then it's liberated. I don't care if it's an ego.
So the self is the one observing. Is that a correct?
The one who is observing is the observer. And you could call it a self, you could call it an ego, call it anything. It's the observer. That's the path quality. The ground is suffering. The path is, what the hell is this? How do I work with this? What do I do with this? And then the fruition is seeing that there wasn't anybody on any path. There wasn't any path. There wasn't anybody on it. And you have transcended the three worlds. You've transcended it. I mean, you actually are, there's no one there, but their transcendence has occurred. And it's not even an occurrence because that's a time and space thing to you. The only thing I'm emphasizing over and over again is train your mind. How do you do that? You sit down and experience how untrained it is. You just sit and notice how untrained it is without trying to manipulate it or control it, at least the way I teach it. The other teachers might say, well, do this mantra, or close your eyes and scan your body, or, and not wrong. It's just, you might have to do that. That might be a better thing for you to do than this. But if you're in this room, you're at least considering this. Fundamentally, it's about awareness. It's not about what arises in the awareness. But boy, it sure is seductive. Final question?
I lost it.
Okay. I know how that feels. I lost my phone. I lost my continuous glucose monitor, and I'm totally homeless. Yes.
You used the images of the hideouts of ego and this level of circularity.
It could look just like a lot of junk. It's the kind of feeling that will show up in the consciousness or in the awareness, maybe more like just being tired of it. Just tired of all that rotating around stuff. And so that might be the way the contrast begin to, instead of this looks really good and this looks really bad, eventually you see it's just more stuff. The good stuff and the bad stuff. It's just phenomena arising in the space of consciousness. This is how it feels to slowly make the transition over from grasping and rejecting and shutting down to grasping and rejecting and shutting down with no self. You can't get out of this. If there's no one there, then the grasping, shutting down, and rejecting or anything like that that's happening. If it's this path, then you're doing that on behalf of all sentient beings, all beings, stink bugs, everything. Those stink bugs. So it's a very simple. It's like a shift from somebody to just this.
One more question from Vishal. Should we worry about anything that can make minimal meditation circular?
No. If you're doing it from my perspective, if you sit down, have all your senses open, and with the attitude, and attitude is important. Attitude, I'm just going to receive. Just receiving this. You don't have to say that every 3 seconds, but you can just look at what's coming towards you and what's going away, and just watch it come and watch your thoughts come and thoughts go. Memories come, they come, and then they hang around for a while and get your attention. Maybe magnetize you into some kind of a daydream or something, and then maybe there's a noise on the outside of the building or down the hall or something that kind of brings you back into the room, and then just beginner's mind, just start over. It's just a matter of starting over. Fundamentally, there is no beginning, but we might have to begin a lot in order to fundamentally see that.
A question from Susan Swinney. I'm not sure where she is. So what is the point of a bodhisattva vow or monastic? A greater time spent observing in light of that intention without judgment or resistant to what is?
I'm not buying that. You're way too smart for me. So I would just about have to go into that question, the concepts you're using there, and see how you intend that, how you mean that, because a lot of people can say the word bodhisattva, use any of those words and be coming at it from a different way. But the fundamental idea here is to be fundamentally aware of what this is. And that seems to be way to approach that is to stop trying to pull oneself up by one's bootstraps or make it all about you getting more enlightened, more better, more higher, more clear, more kind, more generous and everything, about fundamentally meeting people where they're at. Save all beings. This is and you may need a vow to do that, because that's just what you're asking. You may need to do it with a vow. You may not. I promote nothing. I don't care if you want to be a bodhisattva, you have to convince me before I'm going to help you. I can be convinced. But you can also do this on your own. I don't know. There might be all kinds of ways that I have never heard of. I'm sure there are. But it seems to help to have some kind of a form, because the nature of ego and the nature of samsara is without end. It's a circle. Just like the 12 links in the chain of existence. It's circular. And we don't see the circularity because, like, if you're on your little pony on the merry-go-round, you don't think of what's happening on the other side. You're just on your pony. You're going along. Or you might be an old person sitting at a bench next to someone who's on a pony. But it's circular. I don't mean to be too silly about it, but it is just very circular. And it's very magnetic. It's very colorful. And it's seductive. And so you're sitting there. So it may be, if you hear, path may function with a vow to be with all things, or it may be just an attitude that you're trying to have. I think it's much more powerful, has much more, to use the relative adhesive, glue yourself to the Dharma. First, there has to be the inspiration that I need to study this. 2,500 years ago, someone understood something, and they shared it with a few other people, and then they shared it with people, and then it became a community. We call it the Sangha, the spiritual community. The Buddha, the example of someone who was not at war, who was sane, and Dharma, the truth that he taught. Everything is dependently arisen. No separate beings anywhere. And the Sangha, the community of people that are coming together with the guidance of a teaching person to train their mind. It's the simple version. Does it sound like I answered your question? You don't know? Does it? All right. Well, that's good. Have another one? No? Okay, thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our chant books. I'd like to remind everybody, this Saturday we'll be up in Traverse City for the monthly retreat, if you can be there. Also, 3 people will be receiving Jukai on Saturday at Traverse City. And a reminder about our donation boxes in the hallway, and also we accept payments online and in the mail. Thank you for your help.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o san chi shifu, shi-son bu sa mo sa, mo ja ro mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.